Gemara, Nashim ba'im lishma, the women are coming to hear, and the children, you're bringing them liten schar lemeviehen, to give schar to those who are bringing them. That's what we learned. So Nashim coming to learn, to listen, means that women don't have a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. They don't have the obligation of learning Torah. The mitzvah of Talmud Torah, there is two elements in it. And that's why, by the way, the Tur says in Simam Mem Zayin that we say 2 brachot every morning on Torah. One element of it is la'asok b'divrei Torah, or al divrei Torah, the way Sfaradim say it. The learning itself is a mitzvah. Even if you know you have learned it 100 times, as we're going to have this in Daf Tet later on in the Gemara, that you learn it 101 times, that's the limit, the minimum limit. You know the thing, and it's still, you're learning it. It's a mitzvah of be'etzem, it's a mitzvah of Talmud Torah, and then there's a mitzvah of knowing what to do. It's very difficult to do something when you don't know the halakha. So that woman also have, but it's not a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. You have to keep Shabbat, so you have to first learn the Yilchot Shabbat in order to be able to keep Shabbat, right? Like Chafetz Chaim writes I'm putting a plug now for the Semicha program Sunday mornings. Starting halachot of Ohel this Sunday morning coming up, Bezrat Hashem at 7 a.m. Chafetz Chaim writes that if you don't constantly learn Yilchot Shabbat, you're certainly going to be Mechalel Shabbat. So you have to know the halachot in order to do them, and hence that woman but they don't have mitzvah of Talmud Torah. So Nashim ba'im lishmoa, they come to hear because they're learning, but it's not the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And children, you bring them because the bringing of the children is going to have an impact. And therefore the parents get schar because the child now already, you started them, it has an effect, the Kiddushav, the Divrei Torah going in their ears, even as little children, infants, and even fetuses, it will be impacted. Like the Gemara says this in Yerushalmi, in Masechet Yevamot. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yeshua, his mother, when she was pregnant, would bring him to the Bet Midrash, would bring herself, and listen, because she wanted the fetus to hear the Divrei Torah. And when she gave birth, she would bring the baby into the Bet Midrash in the back of the Midrash and listen to the Divrei Torah. And therefore, the Mishnah tells us, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, when he counts the Talmidim of Rabbi Chaim Zakai, says, Rabbi Yeshua, Ashrei Yolato. Fortunate is the mother, Ashrei Yolato. Why Ashrei Yolato? Because he became who he became because of his mother. Ashrei Yolato. And that's the Nashima. Now, this actually explains the question we asked last shiur, why it is that Rabbi Yeshua got so excited when he heard this. You had a gem. You wanted to not tell me this gem of a Devar Torah that Rabbi Azariah said. What's the big deal? You know what the big deal is? Because he is Rabbi Yeshua. He is Rabbi Yeshua Ashrei Yolato. Says that's the story of my life. My mama is the one that brought me to Bet Midrash, and I became who I became. And you now gave me an anchor in the Psukim of Hakel, that Nashim Ba'ot Lishma, and for Yeladim, for children, the Taf, the Ten Sechar Lemeviehen. That the person that starts off the child early on, that's basically going to affect that child in the future to come. So says the Gemara, Ve'od darash, just 4 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Ve'od darash, he also darshin, they are telling him, again, this is 2 Talmidim of Rabbi Yeshua talking to him about what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah taught that day in the Bet Midrash. So they're telling him, he also said, Et Hashem he'emarta hayom, ve'Hashem he'emircha hayom. What's the pshat? What's he'emarta? He'emarta means shibachta, says Rashi. You praised Hashem, and Hashem praised you. What does that exactly mean? It's like Yit Amiru Kol Pa'alei Aven, the pasuk in Tehillim. Shevach, praising. So says the Gemara, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Hashem is speaking to Klal Yisrael. Atem asituni chativa achat ba'olam. You, the Jews, made me, Hashem, one in the world. You're the ones that pushed the understanding and the belief of monotheist Avraham Avinu. I, in return, also will make you the one and only ones in Olam Hazeh. So the Gemara explains, you made me one, as it says every day, our pasuk of faith. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one. All of the different midot that you see from Hashem, Elokeinu, whether it's midat hadin, midat harachamim, all of it is one. Unlike the common belief that was there in Babylonia and in Persia, by the way, as well, that you have the Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses it, that the basic belief was that there are two different kochot, because Hashem was good, can't be bad. So therefore, why do you have bad things happening to good people? Must be that you have hormiz v'ahuramiz, right? In Persia, they would say ahura mazda, right? That would be the power, the koch of good and koach of bad, ahriman and ahura mazda. That's in Farsi they would say it, but in the language of the Gemara, hormiz v'ahuramiz. That was the common belief of the Avodah Zarah and of the Kochavim, the Zoroastrians as well, in Zartushtis, and this is Atem Asituni Chativa Achad Hashem says you're the ones that push this belief of Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad, and therefore I will in return make you Chativa Achad Ba'olam, that you're the one and only ones. Shenemar, as it says, Umi Kamcha Yisrael Bo Echad Ba'ares. Who is like Am Yisrael, Goy Echad Ba'aretz? They're the only nation, they're the one nation in the land. This is the pasuk that David HaMelech says after Hashem told him that his son Shlomo is going to build the Beit HaMikdash. Hashem. Ve'afu patach ve'darash. And he also started and darshaning. So here Rashi again says this is another piece from Rabbi Azariah. The Maharsha understands that now Rabbi Yeshua gets involved. That now Rabbi Yeshua is the one that started darshaning. Divrei Chachamim kedarbonot. The words of Torah, the words of Chachamim are like darbonot. Darbonot is a piece of metal, sharp metal, that you keep to control the animal in process of plowing the land, right? So says Gemara, uchmasmerot netuim, and they are like pegs, they're like nails that they are anchored. Netuim ba'alei asufot. We'll see what that means. Not nitnu mero'eh echad, and they're all given from one shepherd. So explain the pasuk. There are four things to explain over here. Says the Gemara. Why is it that divrei Torah is example to darbon, to this piece of metal? Just like the darbon is mechaven et hapara letlameha, you use it to keep the oxen in their path, in their shvil, to go straight and not to stray. Divrei Torah also, to bring life to the world by means of plantation and agricultural system. After Divrei Torah, Torah is also the same way. Mechavnin et lomdehem, they straighten up their learners from pathways of death to pathways of life, says the Gemara. So says the Gemara, Darbon, sometimes you take it off the piece of wood that's on, and sometimes you move it. So maybe divrei Torah also should be mitaltelin, that they should be also fluid, so to speak. The Gemara says no. That means they could be moved. They're not stationary. And changing around, yes. So says the Gemara, maybe I should suggest that the divrei Torah should also be moved and changed like that. No, they're like pegs, they are like nails, that they are steady and they are stationary. Says the Gemara, so maybe I should say, just like masmer, just like the pegs and the pins, that they are chaser, velo yeter. That means when you poke a hole with a nail into the wall, it takes away from the wall. It makes a hole in the wall. It takes away and doesn't add anything. So maybe Divrei Torah also takes away and doesn't add anything. Says the Gemara, no. Talmud lomar netuim. They are planted, not poked, but planted. And just like netiyah, just like any plantations, pareh veraveh, they grow and they multiply. Af Divrei Torah, harin v'rak, Divrei Torah also are pareh veraveh, they multiply, they add, and they bring blessings. Says the Gemara, what's ba'alei asufot? Elu talmidei chachamim sheyoshvin asufot, these are talmidei chachamim that they sit in groups and groups, skin Torah, and they learn Torah. We had this just before, that cherev al abadim v'no'alu, the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot, that you don't, the way Torah is acquired is in groups, in chabura, and divrei Torah niknin ela bechabura. So this is talmidei chachamim that sit together in a large chabura and they learn Amud Yomi, right? Says the Gemara, halalu metna. This is something very important that the Gemara says here now. They sit and learn together. Halalu metamein, halalu metaharin. Some of them they say this is tahor. Some of them they say this is tameh. Halalu osir, halalu matin. Some say this is asur. Some say it's mutar. Halalu postil, halalu machshirin. Some say this is pasul. It's no good. And there are those who say it's kasher. Shema yomar adam. Maybe you will think to yourself, how do I learn Torah? So much unclarity over here. This rabbi says it's mutar, that rabbi says asur, tameh, taor, asur, mutar. Whoa. Says the Gemara, Talmud lomar, kulam nitnu mero'eh had. All of them, all of these words are given from the same shepherd. El echad netaran, the same Hashem that gave this, gave that as well. Harnes echad amaran, it's the same thing. Mipi adon kol hamasim, all of them are from the mouth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dichtiv, as it says, Vaydaber Elohim et kol advarim ha'ele. Hashem said, kol advarim ha'ele, all of this. The Ran in his Drashot, Joshua Gimel, and really the Ritva says this as well in Masechet Eruvin Daf Yud Gimel. There the Gemara deliberates on the Machloket Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, and the Gemara says there was a famous Gemara. It's a Bat Kol that came out and said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim ve'halacha ke Bet Hillel. That both Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, despite their arguments, their words are divrei Elokim chayim. They're both parts of Torah, but halacha is like Bet Hillel. So Bet Shammai, even though that's not halacha, kedivrei Bet Shammai, but still is Torah mi Moshe Sinai. And they explain that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he got the Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him the entirety of Torah, which includes this, all the svarot, the logics of Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel, the machlokets, and all of it which comes with it, the deliberation is all part of the Torah. Now, I want to just open a parenthesis over here, important based on the Rambam. Rambam in the beginning of his Perush on Mishnayot, the Akdama to Perush Mishnayot, he explains a lot of very valuable things. And one of the gems that he says over there is the following. He explains how Moshe Rabbeinu taught Klal Yisrael the 13 midot she'atorah nidreshet bahen, the 13 different mechanism and methodologies that Torah is explained through those. The Braita of Rabbi Ishmael, and says Rambam the following. Listen to this. Says Rambam, the Moshe Rabbeinu would come, teach them the Torah that he learned from Hashem. So okay, Hashem taught me this, this, and this, and this. And he would leave, which is a Gemara really in Masechet Eruvin, Daf Nun Dalet, on page 54. The Gemara explains exactly how the system worked. Moshe would come, first teach it to Aaron and Nadav and Avihu, and then Aaron would teach it, and Shivim Zkenim, and then Aaron would teach it, then Nadav and Avihu would teach it, then Shivim Zkenim. Everyone would end up reviewing it at least 4 times, and then Moshe would go. So says Rambam, after Moshe would leave, people would start now debating different halachot that would come out of this teaching that they learned. and using the 13 midot Torah nidreshet bahem. And Rambam says you would have a scenario in which they're discussing a certain halacha, and Pinchas, I'm saying to you what the Rambam writes. Pinchas would say, halacha is like this. Otniel ben Knas, who was one of the tremendous Talmidei Hamim of the time, would say, no, halacha is not like this, halacha is like this. So what happens? Now you have a machloket in Moshe Rabbeinu's Bet Midrash. Rambam says, says everyone would get involved, and you would try, each one would try to prove their point using the tools that Moshe Rabbeinu taught them. And either you would convince the other person to change his mind, and then you would have a psak, or if you ended up with a machloket, what would you do? After a few hours, you still have a massive machloket. Now you got everyone involved. You have 10,000 people who say like this. What do you do then? No, stop right there. You know what I would say? I would say, go knock on Moshe Rabbeinu's live right there. Knock on his door and say, can you please, let me ask Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu was the only Navi, says Rambam, that he could initiate a question, a conversation with Hashem. Other Nevi'im, there are tools and vessels for Hashem to connect to us. Moshe Rabbeinu was a two-way street. He could say, I have a question. Pinchas is correct, or Otniel ben Knas. Like, please tell us what's the halacha over here. Rambam doesn't say that. You know what Rambam says? Acharei rabim latot. You go after the majority. Why? Why not ask Hashem? Partially because lo b'shamayim. As we mentioned this many times before, the Gemara in Yevamot, Daf Yud Gimal, the Gemara in Bava Betzia, and Daf Nun Chet and Nun Tet, the story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Chorkenus. We have discussed this in past a lot. The Torah is not in Shamayim. Hashem has given the Torah to earth, says, I want you to deal with it. So Bet Shammai, who says is Asur, Bet Hillel, who says Mutar, Otniel ben Knas, who says like this, and Pinchas, who says, all of it is part of the Torah, and I want you to deal with it. And whatever the majority is, you are creating Torah. But this is where it's one of the most fundamental yesodot that you learn, is that we become partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in creation of Torah. It says whatever the rov, the majority is, that is going to be the halacha down here. All of these svarot, they have merits. But what the halacha is decided by Sanhedrin, by the majority of Sanhedrin. And that's why Hashem wants it to be. So hence, even in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, who easily he could have gone next door and he would ask, it's not what Hashem wants. It's not a b'di eved nowadays that you follow the majority because we don't have Moshe Rabbeinu to ask. Even when you have Moshe Rabbeinu to ask, he did not, because that's the way the Torah is supposed to be learned. So that makes the Gemara in Chagigah, Daf Gimel fame. That makes it so fundamental, this Gemara, that says the Gemara, you should make your ear like a funnel. Acquire for yourself an understanding, a heart that understands the Shmoat, the Divrei Metameim, to hear the words of those who say it's Tameh, and those who say it's Taor, those who say it's Asur, et Divrei Matirin, those who say it's Mutar, et Divrei Poslim, et Divrei Machshirin, those who say is Pasul or Kasher. Now you understand why this is so fundamental. Rabbi Yeshua hears this, he says to them, you have this youngster. We mentioned this before in Masechet Brachot. Rabbi Elazar Azariah was 18 years old at the time. He became the Nasi. It's around the corner Pesach now of Harei Ani Kevin Shivim Shana. He looked like a Ben Shivim Shana, but he really, in reality, was 18 years old. And Rabbi Yeshua was much older. He says, a generation that has Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it's not a Dor Yatom. It's a tremendous blessing to have him as a leader. Okay, great. Now the Gemara asks the obvious question. It says, you come to visit your rabbi, and he says, what was the halacha in the Bet Midrash? What was the chidush in Bet Midrash? And they start tarufing with him. Say, no, you're not here to say anything. You're here to listen. Well, just say to him. He had such beautiful divrei Torah to say, and you're thing. What is this? Why did they do what they did? And Mara says, because there was a very strong precedent not to do this. And what was the precedent? This is again, remember, this is Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yeshua's chavruta, his main peer was Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, both of which were the Rebbeim of Rabbi Akiva. These are the two Rebbeim of Rabbi Akiva. Now, we have mentioned several times that Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus was makpid, was a very specific person. We had this Gemara in Masechet Tanit, how when there was drought, they davened so many tefillot and they sent Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol down to the Teva to be the Shaliach Tzibur, and he davened 24 hours and nothing happened. I said, okay, fine. Rabbi Akiva went down, who was his student, right? And he said few words, Avinu Malkeinu, En Lanu Melech Elata, Avinu Malkeinu Rahem Aleinu, started coming black, dark clouds and started pouring. And everyone was meranen. They say, must be Rabbi Akiva is bigger than his rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer. But Kol came out and said, no, not because he's greater than him, but because Ze Ma'avir al Midotav, Veze Eno Ma'avir al Midotav. Rabbi Akiva was very easygoing. Was very humble in that way. It was not an exacting personality. Rabbi Eliezer was an exacting personality. He was makpid. We saw this before in also Masechet Baba Metzia. We have mentioned it several times in the story of Tanur Shalachnai, that Rabbi Eliezer ended up being excommunicated because he did not want to accept the majority that we just spoke about. When they had the same machloket of halalu metameim halalu ta'arim. It was a story based on a question in halakha that a tanur oven that became tameh, if you break it, the klicheres, the Torah says it becomes tahor. Now, how about if you reconstruct it? So I plan it, I slice it nicely to pieces. Now it's tahor. Then I cement the pieces back, the slices, the rings back together, right? So Rabbi Eliezer held that's tahor. Chachamim, Rabbi Yehoshua held that's tameh, and Chachamim sided with Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Eliezer didn't accept, and they excommunicated him because he was exacting. He says this in Masechet Sanhedrin towards the end of his life when the student went back to him, what he said to them, and so on. These are things, the stories that we don't have the time to go back. But generally speaking, that's Rabbi Eliezer's personality. So what the story was with him was the following. The Tanya, they were hesitant, these two people, to say the Chidush to Rabbi Yehoshua because of Mishum Maaseh Shaya, because of the story that happened with Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya, we learned the Braita. Maaseh Rabbi Yossi ben Durmaskid. Rabbi Yossi ben Durmaskid went to see his rabbi. Lakbir Pene Rabbi Eliezer ben Lod. He went to Lod to see Rabbi Eliezer. Amar lo. So Rabbi Eliezer also said, Mach Chidush haya bebet HaMidrash. Of course, he was not going to Bet HaMidrash because he was excommunicated. Amar lo nimru. So he, without hesitation, started telling him the halakha that they said, the discussion in the Bet Midrash. Nimnu vegamru. They counted up to a minyan and they decided based on the vote, basically. Amon u'Moav ma'aserin ma'aser ani b'shvit. That Amon and Moav in the suburbs of Eretz Yisrael, in the east side of Yarden, they should be giving Maaser Ani in Shnat HaShemitah in Shvit. Now, what's the history behind this? We have mentioned before that there are 4 types of Maasrot. There is Truma, there is Maaser Rishon, then there is Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani. Now, Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani don't coexist. The second type that you give, Maaser Sheni, in some years, that type is called Maaser Sheni, and you use it yourself in Yerushalayim. You have to go up to Yerushalayim and eat it. And in the 3rd year and the 6th year, there's no Maaser Sheni. We call it Maaser Ani. You have to support the Aniyim with it, right? Now, Mina Torah, outside Eretz Yisrael, no Masrot. There's no Chiyuv of Masrot. The Nevi'im, the Chachamim, instituted that they should be also giving Masrot in areas that were captured by Yidden outside Eretz Yisrael primer. So once you say that, they also don't keep Shvit. So what do you do on Shvi? Technically speaking, you're chayav to give masrot even in Shnat Shemitah. So there's no precedent. What do you do in Shnat Shemitah? The other years you follow the halachot of Eretz Yisrael. So in the first year, second year, and the fourth year, you'll give Maser Shani. Third and sixth, you give Maser Ani. Fine. But in Shnat HaShemitah, in Eretz Yisrael, there is no Masrot because no one is working the land. What do you do outside Eretz Yisrael, in the suburbs, in the areas adjacent to Eretz Yisrael? So says the Gemara, Nimnu begamru, this Rabbi Yossi ben Durmaskid is telling Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, says, today in Bet Midrash, Nimnu begamru. They voted and they said that Ammon and Moab, those areas of Ammon and Moab, on Shnat Shemitah in the 7th year, you know what Maaser they give? They give Maaser Ani to support the Aniyim, right? So says the Gemara, Amar lo, he got upset. You're talking about the Eliezer's personality. He got upset. Why did he get upset? Because he felt, again, maybe, just maybe a person could say that he felt the pain that he's not there to offer them. He can't be there in the Bet Midrash to offer them with the wealth of information that he had. He was like a Sefer Torah, and he said it himself at the end of his life. He said, it's like a Sefer Torah filled with Torah, and now is being closed. And when he was dying, and he's going to be buried, and no one is going to know thousands and thousands of halachot that's buried inside of me, he said. So this is one example of it, very simple example, that they had in Bet Midrash, and they counted up to vote, and he says, as you're going to see in the Gemara in just a moment, that I know that this is halakha from hundreds of years ago. You don't need to count up to vote. But he says to them, go tell them, don't worry about it. You got it right. You got it right. You voted correctly. But this is already a precedent of halakha from hundreds of years ago. Therefore, he got a little bit excited, and he told him, Yossi, Peshot Yadecha. Extend your hands, v'kabel enecha. Lose your eyesight, basically. Except your eyes. Pashat yadav v'kibel enaf. That's how Bacha Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer cried, ve'amar, and he said, Sod Hashem li re'av, uvrito le'odiav. You see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure that the Torah exists, and the Torah is learned and decided properly. How so? Amar lo, he told Rabbi Yossi ben Durmaskid, Lech emolaim, go to the Bet Midrash and tell them in my name, Al tachushu leminyelchem. Don't worry about your vote. You got it right. Your vote was correct. Kach mekubalani. I have a tradition. Mi Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, from my Rabbi Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. Sheshama mi Rabo, v'Rabo mi Rabo. That he heard from his rabbi, and his rabbi heard from his rabbi. By the way, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, never forgot a thing in his life. He was like Bor Sut She'eno Ma'abed Tiba. He had photographic memory. The Kid Rabbi Eliezer himself, in Sefer Kid Rabbi Eliezer, says that he never said something that he didn't hear from his Rebbe, right? A tremendous memory. So he says, from our rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I heard from him, who he heard from his Rebbe heard from his Rebbe, all the way back, Hilchata Moshe Sinai, that this is a halakha of Moshe Rabbeinu himself, but they had also east and west of the Yarden, and Moshe Rabbeinu himself instituted this very halakha that Ammon u'Moav masrid Maaser Ani b'Shvi'it. On the year of Shvi'it, Ammon and Moav, they should give Maaser Ani. So Chazak Baruch for your minyan, you actually, when mechaven to the halakha, you did it correctly, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure the Torah does not stray from the path of Emet. But at the same time, I have this tradition all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu. So says the Gemara, what's the reason behind this? Matam, harbe krachim kafshu ole Misraim. Many cities were captured by Ole Misraim, by the first Aliyah, when the Jews with Moshe Rabbeinu came from Misraim, and then they went with Yeshua and conquered the land. They conquered many, many cities that Ole Bavel did not capture. When they came back from the first destruction from Babel, they did not take over those cities. Why? Because the first kedusha that Eretz Yisrael got by conquering land, which again, this is a talk which is complex and beyond the scope of this shiur, of kinyan milchama, the kibush milchama that the Ran speaks about it in Masechet Nedarim, Daf Kafchet, for those who just finished Daf Yomi and Nedarim, of kinyan hamelech, by the fact that you are kovesh in milchama, you conquer a land, it becomes yours. So many of the lands of surrounding Eretz Yisrael were captured by Olei Mitzrayim, by the first group of Jews who came with Yehoshua and Moshe Rabbeinu, and they conquered land. But when they came up from Babel for second Beit HaMikdash, they did not conquer them. Why? Because the first conquest of Eretz Yisrael was not an eternal kedusha. Was a kedusha l'sha'ata, for that time until the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. Beit Rishon was destroyed. They went to exile to Galut. They came back. Whatever the second time they conquered from Eretz Yisrael is kedusha l'sha'ata v'kedusha l'atid lavo. It's an eternal kedusha. This, of course, is grounds for discussion of the holiness of Har HaBayit right now, and holiness of the Mekomot HaKadoshim, and of course for Maserot and Trumot and all of the things that we have to deal with right now in Eretz Yisrael. So it's a very deep and vast concept, which we're not going to get into the details of. Says the Gemara, the reason they didn't capture all of those side places is they left them like that the Aniyim should have parnasah in Shinat HaShemitah, to be able to take from the fruits and the produce of those areas. So Tana, we learned, after he came down, so to speak, he was calm, Rabbi Eliezer, Amar, he davened for Rabbi Yossi ben Raskin, he just lost his eyesight because of him. He davened that the eyesight should go back, and they went back, and that's the story of Rabbi Eliezer. This is again very much needed to know the backdrop, the background of both of Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer, and all the stories that we try to allude to very quickly today, and we will continue this with Zat Hashem in the days to come. Chazaku Baruch.